All right, we're back and we have a good one today. Thanks, everyone. Another episode of The Climb. And I got a meeting of the minds. The two wonderful therapists, my dear friends, Steph and Devyn, join us together today to talk best practices, some tips, some tricks, some tools, whatever you can take away from this episode to help you guys. I brought in, two powerhouses here. What do you think, guys? This is a good idea for us to collaborate?
Right?
100%. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. And it's of course, I feel as if, it's personal conversation prior to launching the record button. But man, we had some really good conversations about therapy. And I want to just reiterate, if anyone hasn't seen Devin and Steph's episodes previously, please do so. We shine a lot of light, especially not only for therapists and what they do, but how they kind of have to take care of themselves and be mindful. And that's something that these two are always working on, for themselves. But what is really important, why they're both here today, is for you, the viewer, to take away some practical stuff. And I think, with this conversation, really simple stuff, interventions, maybe just something you can practice at home by yourself, maybe with someone else. But we want to help as best as we can. So as that being said, I'll turn it over to you guys and want to just get your thoughts on the topic.
Yeah. So something that I feel like has been coming up so much with me and my clients in our sessions is social media. Like it is everywhere. I still have yet to download TikTok. I'm just never doing it. I'm not going down the rabbit hole. Everyone can tell me about the trends and what's going on. But something I feel like I'm always reminding my clients is my catchphrase is what's on your feed will feed you. So if you're seeing what am I eating in a day and internalizing that and changing your diet and trying to look like A, B, and C, that's what you're going to see. That's what's going to happen. Versus if we're thinking about mental health, if we're thinking about our well-being and morning routines and nighttime routines and just taking care of yourself, like just being able to sit with yourself. You don't need anybody else to do this activity, but scrolling through your phone and asking yourself, like, am I seeing this on my feed? Is this feeding me at all? It's probably not. Hopefully it is, but there's some really good accounts that you can follow that will help you see mental health more, will help you see how to get peace of mind and just more relaxation throughout your feed. And that will actually be helpful and practical for you. One of my favorites is, I'm not sponsored by them at all, but it's the Calm app. So they always are posting like the circle that says like breathe in, breathe out, or hold your breath, or listen to the sound. And every time that pops up, I swear I have to like actually stop and do it because it is such a reminder of like, what am I doing here? What's the purpose of this scroll? So what's on your feed will feed you. So finding a time, whether that's tonight, tomorrow morning, just spend 10 minutes scrolling, maybe even not even that long, but just saying, what am I getting out of following this person or this account? And can I actually unfollow it and see if it's making a difference for me? And where can I like search mental health or the Calm app, any of those kind of mindfulness apps, and just add them to your feed and see how it helps you.
Love that. I love that. I mean, it's obvious for me. I've been stressing out a lot about what the Giants are going to do next Thursday for the draft. And it's clear. I mean, it's all I'm looking at with the Twitter. I did take off Instagram many months ago from my phone because it's just a time suck for me. But when you were saying that, it reminded me, I forget who it was. So I apologize, whoever it was. But they told me this is a strategy they did with Instagram. So essentially, like, hey, no hard feelings. They deleted it, pretty much all of their friends of following. And maybe they made a separate account, like a what is it, a Finsta, a fake Insta,
Finsta,
right?
yeah.
But it's like I don't know what's the best way to put it, like a self-improvement Insta, like where they had financial accounts, mental health accounts, different types of entrepreneurial accounts. Which that in itself, I feel as if you're really into that, you do have to watch your screen time because I can go for hours. But that's such a good way of like harnessing the power of social media and in a good way. Really good thought. I love it.
Yeah.
I feel like the social media piece too. Where I work now, we used to have a group and it was basically all geared towards, it was like mental health and social media. And, obviously we talk about how great social media can be, but there are harms to everything.
Mhm.
And it was really interesting to just hear from different perspectives of like, what are the good things that I've gotten out of using social
Mhm.
media? What are the things that have maybe affected me a little bit more as a result? And it was kind of neat to hear it from people who were like the younger crowd. And then, I have people in my groups who are in their 50s and 60s who
Mm.
aren't so like in tune with social media and how big it has gotten. Um,
Mhm.
but kind of like seeing that dynamic of communication with different ages in social media and how it has impacted them has been pretty neat. And I feel like I've learned a lot from it too.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. I like a couple things you said there. It just kind of reminded me how it's called social media for a reason to be social, but I think sometimes people hide behind their phone.
Mhm.
They kind of view things with envy or greed, and instead of for instance, celebrating someone else and commenting on
Mhm.
it, or sending something to someone you haven't seen in a while, like, hey, this made me think
Mhm.
of you. Um,
Mhm.
because when you kind of use it without, like you're saying, Steph, with more or less like positive things that
Mhm.
could benefit you, and in the aspect of not being social, it's like, man, then what is
Mhm.
this? This is just like
Mhm.
a trap
Right.
for your mind, and it's what is it? What essentially what side is it feeding? A positive or negative side for you?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And I think there's just these kids that at least that I work with, they connect on social media. It's their form of communication. And so, we know that they're going to be on it at least. And so it's just, how can we have this subtle reminder to just make it helpful for you, make it impactful? You're going to
Hmm.
get sucked in. It's probably inevitable, but can we limit it at nighttime a little bit? Like, can you intentionally go on these more relaxing accounts and scroll through those accounts, seeing what Sally's doing tonight and why you're hanging out with Sally instead. And
Hmm.
of course, you're not even because we're feeling anxious about the social, the physical social. So it's such a rabbit hole, but I think just encouraging, the clients that I work with to just find a way to make it a little bit more impactful for yourself. This can be such a difference for them.
Yeah. And to your point with like just technology itself kind of helping, it can be so beneficial if you
For
utilize it the right
sure.
way.
For sure.
You referenced the Calm app. So many people actually are, if they work for a large corporation or even a small to
Mm-hmm.
medium sized business, they might have access to the Calm app for free. My
Mm-hmm.
company
Mm-hmm.
does that. Christina's
Oh,
company
great.
does that. Many do, right? And if maybe you don't want to pay the $60 a year or whatever that is,
Mm-hmm.
I think, what, $12? No, $5 a month. Not a math guy. Sorry about that. I talk for a
Me
living. I
either.
don't do numbers.
Yeah, no, no math.
But right, there's other apps in there that can help you, that make
Mm-hmm.
mindfulness a lot easier, that make
Mm-hmm.
breathing techniques like for you, that were,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, I use an app. It's like one of the best apps I've ever purchased. It was $5 at one time, and it's called the Mood
Mm-hmm.
Kit. It has a journal. I rate my mood in it. It actually goes through the cognitive behavior theory. Super,
Mm-hmm.
super interesting. Choo choo, there's that train.
The train is tuning in. It
Yeah.
really is. Always.
Um, but it's really cool. It basically goes through these different perceptions that you have. It
Mm-hmm.
asks you, hey, what are you feeling upset about? All right,
Mm-hmm.
now pick an emotion and rate that 10% to 100%. And then it goes through the distortion that you're potentially going
Mm-hmm.
through. Like, hey, it's all or nothing type of feeling, or anything like that. And then once you kind of, all right, what's another way to think of it? All right, I could just think that it's just one call for work, and you know what? It's not as bad as I think. Life will go on.
Mm-hmm.
So then that 80% of anger goes down to 20% of anger. And my therapist, at the time told me to get this app and was like, don't ever expect to go back to zero. That's not a thing. The
Mm-hmm.
point is to understand that, like, as you guys know with the cognitive behavior theory, is understanding that what you're perceiving right now can be channeled into a better way of thinking so you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
process it and move on. So that itself, like, and it also gives like tips in general. Like they have Thrive tips where it's like, hey, set an alarm every morning to get up at the same time, or hey, be social and things like that. And that was $5. Mood Kit, that's what it's called.
Okay.
$5. And I use it immensely to keep myself honest about my mood with bipolar disorder. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm tracking and I'm never really a 10. The only time that I was a 10 mood was my wedding day and my bachelor party. And 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 it was never I was never consistently a 10. It was only for those 2 days. But
Hmm.
I can kind of map out and speaking with Al, who's been on the podcast, who Devin knows a little bit, I've talked with him. I've talked with Al and mentioned some rough patches that I was in, and I said, "Here's what's going on. I feel like crap, but it's also let's take a look. I'm looking at my mood. Here's the past 5 days, and then this was just all last year." Last December that I kind of walked through it. And he's like, hey, man, it sounds like you're kind of on top of it. You're realizing certain things. So
Mm-hmm.
long story short, technology could be really beneficial. And that's just one way, for instance, for me to kind of use different tools to help
Mm-hmm.
not only in like intense moments, but just every single day.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the cool thing too, oh, sorry, Steph.
No, go ahead.
Like a lot of this stuff, like what you were talking about, AJ, of like we have access to like journal on our phones. We have
Mm-hmm.
access to communicate with people through our phones
Mm-hmm.
or tablets. And that's one thing I've also talked
Mm-hmm.
about is like if you didn't have social media and you couldn't turn to it as, something to you maybe bring your anxiety down, or what would you do? Like, could you turn to a physical journal? Could you call
Mm-hmm.
someone on the phone? Or maybe it's almost like, how do we incorporate what we're getting on social media but using it out, like, off the screen, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense? Hopefully
Mm-hmm.
that does a little bit. But I do feel like we are lucky to live in a time where like we can get apps to journal and meditate, because sometimes people do need like an extra like cushion of support with that. Um, but yeah, I think it's great that we have both for sure.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. And AJ, I was just gonna say with that too, it's sounding like you're a very visual person, right? So to be able to like see the numbers and see the progress over time, I feel like so important. And so many of my clients and athletes really resonate with the visual component.
Mhm.
Same thing what you're saying too, Devin. There's like, right, can we write it down so we keep a tally of other things? I have some clients that are coming to my mind that use an app called Days Since. So it'll be like days since I've vaped, and it'll be like 117, and every day they
Oh,
have this
cool.
reminder. Or days since I began journaling, and like, okay, it's another day that I've journaled, or it's another day that I've journaled back at zero. So even if we don't have access to those kinds of things, that you can keep a tally mark, or you can keep a sheet of paper by your door, by your bed, wherever you journal, or if you want to just like read a book for 10 pages a day, right? How can we just hold ourselves a little bit accountable, whether that's but there are so many apps. You might have to like compile a app list
Yeah.
for the viewers and put it out there, and just so that people have access to these things, so that our feeds become what feeds you in a better way, for sure.
I
It's
Yes.
like
love
my
it.
slogan. I need to trademark.
Yeah. That's
Might have
awesome.
to be a completely different episode where we come prepared with a few apps for the
Yeah, part
viewers.
part two, we could do that for
Just a
I
sure.
love it.
resource episode.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
Devin, what's your like, I love like the feeds, what feeds you, but like what's for you, whether it's working with your clients or just in general, like even with some friends of like, hey, here's a word of advice, here's free advice, here's a tip for you guys, or what's this best practice that you're willing to pretty much give anyone?
So I run, it's kind of different from Steph. So I see 18 and older. So I'm usually, I would say, like, ballparking. Most of my clients are like late 20s and older. I've had clients in their 70s, clients almost, 80. And I think a big part of like therapy in general is like selling the idea of having coping skills, because I have so many clients who are like, coping skills don't work, or I haven't found, a coping skill that I can turn to or I feel comfortable using, or I've used this and it doesn't work and I don't want to go back to it. So something that I've been trying to work on more with my clients is like, let's try things out and let me try them with you. Because I think again, especially in this field, we never want our clients to feel like there's this power differential of like, I'm the therapist, I'm going to tell you what to do. We're going to work together and we're going to find like what's going to be good for you and what's not going to be good for you. Because I've had clients say, I tried this and it didn't work, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you failed at using a coping skill. It just means that it's not for you. And I think I was actually using this in a class I was teaching about, it was doing like relapse prevention planning for people with a
Mhm.
substance use disorder. And we talked about, I think, three classes of coping skills. So, like skills that you can do at any time,
Mhm.
anywhere you're at, coping skills that you need like a specific location or a specific, like maybe a phone or, you know, exercise equipment. And then I think the last one was coping skills that you can utilize with other people.
Mm.
And they were able to like really get out and get really creative with some of the things. Because we think of coping skills like deep breathing and, meditation. And some people are like, I will go for a car ride. I will call a friend. People can get really creative with coping skills. They don't always have to be these like structured, like you need to follow this, that, and the third. Um, but I think for me, just like finding, even if it's just one skill that works and like really sticking to it and leaning into it, can be super helpful.
That's awesome. Yeah, everyone's different, right? I
Mhm.
mean,
Yep.
you can ask a bunch of people that have ADHD or essentially maybe undiagnosed to sit down for 5 minutes and be still and and think and just think about a spot on their forehead. And even though that is the act of meditation, is right, coming in and out of the focus of bringing yourself centered, it's probably really painful for a lot of people.
Mhm.
But hey, what's that one thing that's meditative for you? Um, and I think just speaking firsthand, I used to like make sure that I would time block on my calendar some nights where I'd play video games, where I would listen to a podcast, I would have a sports event up, and I would play video games. And you think it would be really unproductive for my like dopamine and thoughts, but it was just like my time to zone out. Like I'm just zoned out. I'm a
Mhm.
zombie. I'm not doing anything, and that just like helps me with my stress. Is when I'm like, all right, I'm going to take time and make sure that I'm not going to get anything done, and be productive. And to your point, Devin, I feel like everyone has something different, and really the biggest commitment you need to make is the commitment to find something, and
Right.
the acceptance of, yeah, you know what, I need to find something that works for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's okay if something doesn't work. I
Mhm.
think we're really hard on ourselves. I mean, as therapists, I mean, it's just human beings in general. Um, but I think like not ruling something out completely until you've kind of like scratched it off. Because I
Mhm.
tell my clients all the time, you might surprise yourself and you
Mhm.
might find a coping skill that you didn't think would work and it works great. So
Mhm.
there's something for everyone, for sure.
Yeah,
I
I
got a,
think too,
I
just
got a
going
sidebar
so
after you're done, Steph. I got a sidebar. Remember me, my sidebar.
okay, sidebar, got it. I think it's such a good point because you owe it to yourself to try something different. And like you can't knock it till you try. It's something I'm always saying to my clients. And it's funny, I recommended one client, definitely ADHD symptoms, high achiever, perfectionism in there for sure. And I was like, you need to do something that is like brings you back to when you were a little kid. Like, what have you not done in forever? Like, when was the last time you colored? Like, I just threw it out there. And now he's like so into the coloring. It's so relaxing, but it's like structured coloring. Like, everything has a pattern, but it's so soothing.
Yeah.
And we just like had a great conversation of like, if you would have told me that I would have been X years old coloring, there is no shot I would have believed you. And it's like, yeah, would have never known until we tried. And I think just being mindful that even in therapy, like therapists don't always have the answers, and it's trial and error, and just being open to exploring and trying different things. You owe it to yourself. So I think it's such a good suggestion for everyone for sure.
Yeah.
This is why you have the meeting of the minds. right? Yeah, you got the suggestion of, hey, you got to be open to many things never work, and then you throw in the little sprinkle of, hey, what'd you love when you were younger? Like, God,
Mm-hmm.
that is really amazing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, God, that's really, really good. That's gonna stick with me. That's a good tandem we have here. All right, let me go sidebar. This is a little bit
Mm-hmm.
off topic, but kind of on topic. But we kind of talked about a few, right? Like coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
What do you where are your heads at with someone that might say like cope with alcohol or
Mm-hmm.
food? Um, I know I said video games for mine, but maybe that's not a coping skill. Maybe that's how they're trying to, what's the best word? Curb their mood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, that's it's a large topic, but I want to bring it up
Mm-hmm.
because we're here, and I
Mm-hmm.
went sidebar, so here we are.
Mm-hmm.
What are your guys' thoughts on I guess that dangerous line of,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this might be just a vice that's curbing a mood that actually
Mm-hmm.
can reinforce negative things rather than you know what? You genuinely sometimes just need pizza, a slice of pizza or something like that. Or maybe that's just not a
Mm-hmm.
thing, and it's just always kind of uh, feeding a vice or something. I'll
Mm-hmm.
stop talking, but that's my sidebar.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to my relapse prevention plan because I currently teach substance abuse. So this topic comes up all the time of like
Mm.
people who are in active addiction or in recovery, like typically using substances was like that was a coping skill. And that's typically like
Mm-hmm.
how an addiction would become an addiction. And in the relapse prevention plan, I forgot this spot, but there's a spot that basically focuses on like coping skills that have nothing to do with drugs, nothing to do with alcohol. Um, and then like a list of like sober supports of like people that you can kind of like be around that are not in active addiction. Um, but I think for so many people, we don't necessarily think that like having a glass of wine or, you know, uh, having a slice of pizza, like it's not always bad, right? I mean, it's not always going to turn into something. I
Mm-hmm.
think one of the things that I kind of try to drive home because I can think of like clients in particular who are like, I had a really bad day, I had a beer. I had a really bad day again, I had two beers. And you can kind of start to like see where it becomes problematic. It starts to maybe impair their ability to come to treatment, their ability to maintain relationships, jobs. Um, and I think there's a difference between, going out and, it's someone's birthday, you have a cocktail or something. But when you start to see it being used to maybe like dull out the bad, um, I think that's when like more conversations surrounding like the use of substances as coping skills comes up. Because it certainly does, and I'm sure you've seen it too, Steph.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of hard to navigate. I mean, especially with kids too, because that's a whole other beast. But
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear what your experiences are with this.
Yeah. No, it's so good that we have Devyn here to you have that background and that experience with the relapse prevention program too. So for the younger ones, for me, the vaping it's out of control right now, and it's affecting some of my clients, not all of them, but it's something that I'm always assessing for safety in terms of right with suicidality, but also if they're drinking, if they're smoking weed, if vaping, not so much, but it's just kind of bringing it up, which I think is awesome. And it's always been explained to me when we're thinking about substances specifically, not as much food, but it's a way to cope, kind of like what Devyn's saying. Like I might cope by buying a bunch of things and feel much better after me to purchase, whereas somebody might engage in going to the bar for happy hour and staying there much longer. We're all feeling something at the core. So
Mm-hmm.
another thing I'm often saying to my clients is like in therapy, we're peeling back these layers of an onion. We are trying to get at like it's not so much about the alcohol, but it's like what are you getting out of it? How is this serving you? And a lot of people say like it's not serving me, and I'm like it is because then you wouldn't do it. So like sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that's a reality check for a lot of people, especially my teens. And sometimes I'm like a tough love kind of solution focused therapist over here where I'm like, you're getting something out of it and it's okay, but you're here for a reason. So like let's just explore. Let's like peel back one layer at a time and just figure out like what are you getting out of this? And so
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of success with my clients being able to connect the dots a little bit more and understand that it's okay. It's just we're coping in a different way, and is it the most healthy, sustainable way for you to cope and to relax? And just specifically with food and body image and all those things. I work with a lot of female athletes and a lot of dancers, ballet, those kinds of things, and it's a lot and it's a struggle. And some of these clients are really young that struggle with these kinds of things, and it's a very, very fine line with the food and the body image and lack of food and things like that. So for me personally, it's not necessarily my specialty. I don't have extensive training in eating disorder, so I'm always collaborating with other providers on this. And it can be a lot, though. It can be a lot for people to not eat, to eat too much, all of those things. And I'm always just reminding people, it's one of the intuitive eating principles of like, there's no such thing as the food police. Like, there's no such thing as good food or bad food. And like, if there is, who's determining who are the policemen that are telling you it's good or bad, right? Food is food and it's fuel, and we need to fuel our bodies. So making sure that, my clients are sleeping enough, they're getting at least a balanced meal in some regard, like once a day. Sometimes it's once a week for some people. Just staying on top of all of those things is so important for them and all of us too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really well said. I once listened to a podcast, and it was a bipolar podcast, and it talked
Mm-hmm.
about, and I'm sure you guys have heard this a ton with different illnesses and people, in those walks of life, but there was a subject line of something I listened to for a few minutes, but it was essentially people self-medicating with food.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't sound right, but the concept was like the dopamine rush of getting this, or kind of eating your feelings away. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's tongue in cheek, but it's like a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you both were talking about it, right? And I think there has to be some set of awareness. Like, awareness is so broad and is so important to the mental health industry, but is it enough? Is it enough to be aware, or do you simply need to be in this state of acceptance that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I accept the possibility that some nights I need a drink, and that isn't right of me, but that's okay because I'm gonna be, on the straight and narrow. Or, hey, like I'm feeling like crap. I'm gonna go downstairs and I'm gonna make a frozen pizza.
Mm-hmm.
But I accept that that's what's happening. Is,
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm trying to curb my mood.
Mm-hmm.
And not just being aware that, hey, this is crappy food. I feel crappy. Well, I feel better. No, just accept the possibility that it's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit deeper than just, hey, it could happen to me, to, hey, it's probably happened to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that in all walks of mental health, I think awareness is huge, but it's got to
Mm-hmm.
come down to acceptance at the
Mm-hmm.
highest level, whether it's directly with you or indirectly through loved ones or friends. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the inevitable truth. And I find that to be very, very true with these vices, curbing moods, indulgences, and things that certainly over time can be really, really, really detrimental to your health.
Mm-hmm.
I think awareness too can be really scary of like coming to terms with certain behaviors, or even being made aware of certain things by loved ones, and kind of having to like sit with yourself a little bit and say like, okay, this is happening. Let me like sit with it. Let me acknowledge that it's there, and like this is how I'm feeling. Um and then you kind of like gradually work towards that acceptance, right? It's
Sure.
not going to be like an initial like I accept who I am, or I accept
Mm-hmm.
that these are the things that, I engage in when I'm feeling like this. But I think with time, like Steph said with the onion, like you peel the layers back, like you start to understand why, you do certain things, or, feel certain ways, and like your
Mm-hmm.
behaviors oftentimes will follow how you're feeling. But I think the actual like experience of being aware can be
Mm-hmm.
really scary.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
it's so important at the same
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think to that point of awareness, it almost, when it's like you talk it out like that, it's almost like it's not enough to just be aware. You have to continuously, whether you're in therapy or not in
Mm-hmm.
therapy, continuously work on yourself, peel back
Right.
the
Mm-hmm.
onion to get to
Mm-hmm.
that level of acceptance.
Yeah.
Because everyone's rainy day is coming at some point and could repeat
Mm-hmm.
itself too. So
Yeah.
that's good.
I always say to my clients, like, I see you for 50 minutes once a week. Like, what are you doing with all those extra hours? Like, we can talk about it. I can help you be that sounding board and reflect back to you of like, ooh, like we're catching ourselves here. We're falling back into this. But you have to be willing to see that outside of the session. And so it comes, obviously, we're there to help and support and, find these blind spots for our clients. But it takes work outside of the session. And you have to, I'm always saying, like, what are you going to do outside of these four walls, being my therapy office, to help yourself this week? How will you stay on top of it? Or what is something you can do tonight to help yourself? So it's definitely, we have a role in it, obviously, but you have to be, you don't have to be ready because sometimes people just aren't ready, but the acceptance of like, this is going to suck sometimes, but I'm going to try to figure this out with help. And also I'm going to help myself outside of here. So it's a process for sure.
It's almost like leveling with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, like, let's not beat around the bush. Like, just
Yeah.
because this 50 minutes went great doesn't mean,
Mm-hmm.
the rest will.
Yeah.
Which makes me want to ask you guys, Steph, you kind of just got to it, right? You're not beating around the bush, just kind of getting straight to it with your clients. But
Mm-hmm.
I find like one thing that I truly believe in is that we have a problem with internal motivation. A lot of motivation comes externally, like look at social
Mm-hmm.
media, boom, there's your
Mm-hmm.
external information, but not
Mm-hmm.
enough comes within. Um, and essentially, I don't believe external motivation is enough fuel for people in life, and that it needs to come within. So, speaking of someone's own like wellness journey, how do you guys try to spark that internal motivation for the other time outside the therapy session,
Mm-hmm.
which is 30 to 50 minutes just once a week, if that?
Mm-hmm.
Some people may only go in twice a month.
Yeah.
I have
I think
clients oh wait, go ahead. You
no.
go first.
Okay. I'm just thinking specifically about the body image because this has come up a lot with a lot of my female clients. So what I hear, it's a very specific strategy, but I think everyone can pretty much do it. But specifically with negative thoughts about body image, they can sit in the session with me and say like, no, I know that I have A, B, and C on my body that they help me walk, they help me see. But when I go home and I look in the mirror, all of that goes away. I can forget all of the things that I've just told you. So I do this myself. It's in the bathroom right on the other side of this wall here. You pretty much take a picture from when you were younger. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's literally my favorite. It's made so many clients cry. It's made me cry before too. Take your favorite photo of you when you were younger, like your favorite one. Mine is me at the beach in this like super bright colored bathing suit. I love it. I have like the biggest smile on. So it's taped on my mirror in the bathroom. So every day when I brush my teeth, twice a day, if I'm ever in there, I look at that little girl, and if there's anything negative I say about myself, I'm saying it about that little girl. And like, would I actually say that about that little girl? 1,000% not. And also, like, what would that little girl say about me today? What would she be proud of me for? What is she excited for me for? So that's, again, I'm very visual. A lot of my athletes are very visual, but you can sit with me and challenge this thought. But like, how can you challenge the thought on your own? Because it's so hard with the social media, with the trends, being a middle school girl, being a dancer, being a high school athlete. Like, it is a lot trying to come from between your own ears. So it's a great way to just see it and be reminded of like, I have to talk kinder to myself, and it starts with me, nobody else. And you're right there in the mirror, so it's like the perfect situation. I don't know if you guys heard of that.
Unbelievable. Gonna
It's my
channel.
favorite.
I love
I'm
it.
I'm
I'm gonna
I'm
use
driving
it.
over to my parents' house tonight. I'm grabbing toys that I used to play with, pictures,
Yep.
you name it.
Yeah.
Ah,
It's such a good visual. I know it like literally makes me want to tear up every time. But I've had clients come in that are like, I will never say anything mean about myself ever again. I'm like, good, love that for you. Like,
Right.
even better. So I know Kendall Jenner was actually like she had done. I don't know if she was on some. I don't know if it was a podcast or something, but she had come out and said that her therapist had told her that idea too, and that's something that she does. And I always share that with some of my clients. Who are always worried about appearance. And like, this girl's a supermodel and she literally struggles with it too. Like, it's going to be
mm.
okay. But it's literally one of my favorites. Of course, I'm like, of course, I'm going to like this too.
Right.
I heard it before I heard it from her. So it's like, of course, this is so annoying. But yeah, it's great.
If
It's one of my
if
favorites.
if that wasn't such a good example of a public figure using that, I would probably edit it out so I could just
Yeah.
give you the credit.
You
But
can still. It's okay.
oh, that's good. Devin, I know
I
you had
know.
something to add, but is there
Yeah.
anything, unless you're going to forget what you're going to add, is
No,
there
I'm good.
anything like verbally that you're saying? Because it sounds like with the clientele that you're working with,
Hmm.
Yeah.
part of what Steph was saying about leveling with them and being honest probably seems like a part of the dialogue that you're having on a consistent
Hmm.
basis. So curious if there's anything, verbally that you say that people can be like, you know what, you're right. I got this, or, I'll make it to next tomorrow or the next day or next week.
One thing kind of going off of, I mean, I feel like in general, like the idea of like self-esteem and confidence is like super, super, I would say like saturated within therapy.
Hmm.
And I feel like a number of my clients are coming in to improve upon that. Like maybe their self-esteem is already okay, but we're all works in progress and we can all improve. And I talk about like the relationship that you have with yourself.
Hmm.
It's like the most meaningful. It's going to be the longest relationship you have with
Hmm.
anyone. You might as well make it a good one. So it's okay to like lean into the negative experiences. It's okay to highlight the positive ones. But at the end of the day, you are going to spend the most time with yourself. So how can you at least make that experience a good one and like look
Hmm.
back and say, you know what? Even if it's not always going to be like peaches and rainbows, like what are some things that like you would look back on and say like maybe today was a good day when this happened or today wasn't a good day, but I got through it. And just like highlighting like even if it's just like one positive in the day, like I took a shower
Mm-hmm.
or I wrote in my journal or I brushed my teeth because oftentimes like we think about those things as like it's a luxury. Like we just do
Hmm.
it. And sometimes people like that isn't part of their routine. That is like a huge win. Um, just kind of like highlighting one positive thing that you can do. And like when we meet for session, let's have a conversation about it. Like let's really work on empowering that experience for you because brushing your teeth to one person might just be routine, but brushing your teeth to someone else might just be like the greatest thing that's happened that week.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think that's kind of where I stand with it and like the relationship, even the relationship that we all have with
Hmm.
ourselves, and how
Yeah.
important that is. So,
You gave us a twofer in there. So what I'm hearing, and I can't agree anymore, like self
Hmm.
love needs
mhm,
to come first.
Hmm.
Um, actually, that's a concept I've mentioned, I think, both of you. I'm writing a memoir,
Hmm.
and it's called The Climb, just like this podcast, because
Hmm.
life threw these mountain-like obstacles in front of me, and the second mountain that I climbed, I had to realize I had to love myself before I could love anyone else or any other thing. My entire life, I was pouring my heart into other things, other people, except for myself. And you mentioned that like that forget everything else. We're working with the person in the mirror the rest of
Hmm.
our life. That's not changing. So let's focus on
Hmm.
this relationship first,
Yeah.
and then all the rest will kind of fall into place. We'll get to it there. Um, what was the other thing you said? I said twofer, but the last part was what you were referencing, I believe. Help me out here, Steph. It was
I'm forgetting now.
like highlighting one positive, even
Yeah,
if it
yes,
one positive.
wasn't
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
like
yes,
glaring.
yes,
For the
yes,
week. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I'm pretty sure, and I could be like just making this up with a
Hmm.
term of it. I know it's a thing, but it's like the psychology of achievement. It's why making your bed in the morning is so
Hmm.
important because you're
Hmm.
checking something off the list and it makes you feel
Yeah.
good, and then you're kind of building on top of that. So,
Hmm.
Devin, like you're so damn right. You're so
Hmm.
damn right. Even if it's just brushing your teeth or this,
Right.
that, it builds that self confidence. Self confidence can build the self love, and then it kind of just
Hmm.
really starts to work as a fine tuned machine. There's
Yeah.
a book by a Navy SEALs officer, former person, called Make Your Bed on this
Hmm.
very concept.
Hmm.
It is really, really good advice. Both of you guys. Great advice on kind of like channeling that inner motivation to make it, maybe for some people, the next couple minutes, the next hour, the next day, the next
Mhm.
week, the next month. I think that's really important. So, all right, guys, what did I miss? I know we could probably hit a little bit more, but we probably, instead of taking all of our nights and into a 2-hour call, we should probably wrap up with like final thoughts. If you could give someone your best word of advice that you haven't given,
Mm.
but is there anything I missed?
Reiterate, like you owe it to yourself to try and like help yourself. Like you're here for a short time but a long time at the same time. So it's just like you owe it to yourself to try, and it's okay to be scared and nervous about doing therapy, but we're just there to help you and support, and we can figure it out together.
Mm, love it.
Yeah, I would say like very similar to Steph. I think therapy in general can be very intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Even just like finding resources, like having conversations with people about getting help can also be very uncomfortable too. So just like leaning in, especially like being aware of how you're feeling, sparking a conversation with someone when something maybe doesn't feel right. And taking advantage of us. That's why we do what
Mm-hmm.
we do.
Yeah.
Um, so I think, yeah, it's important to drive that message home is that no one is perfect and we all have things that we're carrying around, but there
Mm-hmm.
are people out there who, we're here for you.
Love it. Love yourself, forgive yourself, remind yourself of who
Mm-hmm.
you were, give yourself credit. I mean, we didn't have one specific magic pill or magic tool, magic bullet, because there isn't one.
Mhm.
The only thing that really matters is the person you see in the mirror. And I think you guys have echoed that quite simply tonight. So appreciate everything you guys do and everything you've said. So, guys, I think that's it. I think we maybe have some homework to do with some apps coming back for another one, maybe in the next coming weeks or months. But
Yeah.
I know from the feedback I got from both of you guys,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be a really, really well appreciated episode. So, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for coming on and sharing more about what you guys do and what works best for you and your clients.
Yeah, of
Absolutely.
course. Thanks for having us and
Yeah,
doing what
thanks
you're
for
Abs-
you.
doing.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Until next time. Thanks, everyone.